Welcome to episode 11 of Papa Tom's Take. I've been off the air, so to speak, for a little while. Been busy with other things. As you can see, the month is December. I have my Santa Claus beard. Just finished a couple of Santa Claus gigs and have one more before I can tame this beast. The title of this episode is Whack-A-Mole, and I picked that title because I actually had several false starts on podcasts in the recent past, but it seemed like whenever I'd pick a topic to talk about, some other topic would come out and I'd switch. So I decided to combine issues into one episode where I'll pretty much do just sort of quick hits on several things, just like whack-a-mole, just like the game. In some ways, I think whack-a-mole is the model for the Trump administration. And it just it's tiring to try to keep up with all the craziness. What I'm going to talk about today is not a complete list. You could make another list that covers other moles that are jumping up. I do have some notes for myself today, so if you see me looking down, I'm referring to the notes. First thing I'm going to do is do a couple really quick hits. And the first one is Trump always has referred to President Biden as Sleepy Joe. And as we see from pictures from cabinet meetings and so forth, that he seems to doze off. Of course, the White House says he's just resting his eyes. But if you look at the combination of the way his eyes are and that they're closed and his mouth is kind of in a relaxed way, bottom line is he's sleeping. And it makes you wonder how the people in the cabinet meeting who have to say flattering things about him as they're speaking to him, as they see him nodding off, what goes through their mind. Particularly, there's a picture of him beside Rubio, and Rubio is making a point, and it's very clear that Trump is dead asleep. So I'm not sort of really casting too big a stone on that, because Trump and I are the same age, and there's nothing better than an afternoon nap. And sometimes I find myself kind of wandering and sleeping, but I'm not president of the United States. So Sleepy Joe, Sleepy Don, when you have a president that's this age, you're going to have that. Plus, there are also theories, conspiracy theories about the nature of his health and why did he have an MRI. And by the way, it's crazy. I had an MRI recently on my knee, and as I was being called back, the nurse asked me, "Who am I and what am I having imaged today?" And I answered my knee. And 3 times, once in the room, the technician asked me the same question. So it's absolutely absurd that Trump could get away with saying he didn't know what part of his body was imaged. Either he's really completely stupid, which I don't think he is, or he doesn't want to share. And I'm okay with him not sharing, but then the answer should be it's not life-threatening, and I would rather keep the specifics to myself. If there's an issue that the public needs to be concerned about, we will share that. Something reasonable rather than, I don't know what part got imaged. That's craziness. The next quick topic is there seems to be some cracks in the dam. Some of the MAGA people and the GOP in Congress are starting to say things. I think we've had some resignations, not only in Congress, but throughout the government in protest. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, Stefanik, Nancy Mace, and Tom, I think his name's Tom Massey, all have spoken up and or voted in a way that's counter to Trump's mandates. So, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I have very little in common with, some of her crazier, more outlandish things I think are absurd, but she's not being shy about commenting on Trump's handling of the subsidy continuation for Obamacare, and also she's an advocate for the survivors of Epstein's sex trafficking ring, and so those two things have really placed a wedge between her and the president. So we'll see where that goes, but it seems like there's a crack. The last quick thing that I want to touch on is artificial intelligence. One of the episodes that I did, actually episode 2, hasn't gotten a lot of views, and in my world, a lot of views would be 40. And in some ways, I think it's a very maybe the most important long range episode that I did. It was kind of me playing with ChatGPT, and I use ChatGPT quite a bit. But there are some real issues and concerns around AI in terms of data centers and their need for great amount of electricity and even water for cooling that make that part of AI something that people should be concerned about. People are concerned about AI taking jobs, and so I've heard an argument that AI will actually also create jobs, but I'm not sure they'll be created in the sector of the population that can really fill those jobs. But I don't have a crystal ball on this. But what I will say in this podcast is I believe that AI has the potential to do really good things and the potential to be really bad things. But bottom line is, I think AI will change the way we do a lot of things. Specifically, let me comment on education. I've talked with educators about this, and where they are with this is making sure the students aren't cheating using AI and looking at AI as a way of helping them teach the same stuff in a different way, a better way, a more creative way, a more diverse way. But what I think educators need to be thinking about is AI is not only going to change how we teach, but AI is going to change what we teach. And the school districts that figure that out, the community colleges, the universities that figure that out, will really be preparing students for the latter half of the 21st century. AI can be and is an amazing tool. It's a tutor. It's a lot of things if properly positioned to really revolutionize education. And from my sort of small vision view, those discussions aren't taking place nearly at the kind of depth that they need to be taking place. So let's go into a couple topics more deeply. I'll start with the tax of the drug boats. I'm not a lawyer. I've never been in the military. I've never been in law enforcement. But if you simply look at the military attacks on the alleged drug smuggling boats, there are so many questions that should be answered that aren't being answered. And simply looking at it from a logical standpoint, you have the U.S. military blowing up civilians in international waters. Now, let me restate if I haven't already. I'm not supporting the drug dealers. I think they need to be dealt with, and I think they're a scourge and need to be dealt with. But I don't think this is the best way. Military killing civilians in international waters. Logically, those things just don't compute. Drug trafficking is a criminal offense, and military isn't equipped. They're equipped, but they're not. Their mandate is not to deal with law enforcement. Their mandate is to do other things, defend our country. There is a law in place, the Controlled Substance Act, and I don't have the date, that governs that makes drug trafficking and the importing of drugs, drug smuggling, a federal offense. And there are sentences depending upon the circumstances, whether it's a first offense or not, what the drug is, how much of the drug is present, and so on. But the penalties are from 10 to life in prison, not the death penalty. And so again, just looking at these strikes kind of from a distance, you have U.S. military killing civilians in international waters for offenses that are not capital offenses. That just doesn't compute. You don't need high-level attorneys and judges to make that statement. Yet, apparently, the administration is successfully stonewalling on this, not giving any proof of the fact that these really are drug smugglers. But there's so many things about this. The directions of the boats are headed for some Caribbean islands instead of the U.S. The boats need to travel 1,000 miles to get to the closest U.S. port. Those boats, in order to make that trek, would have to refuel several times. If U.S. intelligence knows where these boats are to the point that they can be blown up, then you can tell when these boats will reach United States waters. And so rather than going after them in international waters, the Coast Guard already has a protocol in place for stopping boats that are suspected to be carrying drugs, for inspecting them, then turning the people over to law enforcement for litigation and so forth. The whole, again, not a lawyer, not a military man, not a law enforcement man, but if you just kind of think about it, doesn't make sense how anybody can believe that this is the right thing to do. And then when you factor in the notion that at least in the first strike, apparently there were survivors, and they went back to kill the survivors. That's against international maritime law. I mean, again, I'm not going to recite the law. I could look it up, but you don't kill people hanging on the side of a boat. You can't make the case that they were going to turn that boat over and continue and deliver those drugs. A friend of mine a few years ago purposely turned over a canoe that probably weighed about 60 pounds in the water, deep water. We had life jackets on. We were planning to do it. And so it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't like a missile came down and blew us up and put us in the water. So we tried to turn that boat over in deep water. We couldn't do it. So the idea that two men were going to be able to turn over a probably fiberglass boat with two or three large engines on the back, plus whatever cargo's in there, is folly. Those men, even if they had weapons, were not a threat to anyone, and there's no way they should have been killed. The American people need to see that video, and the Congress and courts need to take actions. Those are wartime offenses. at somebody's head needs to roll, and it shouldn't be down the line. Uh, uh, Particularly that second attack was completely uncalled for. And again, I circle back to the fact that they're killing these people for things that aren't capital offenses within the federal judicial system. That's all I'm going to say about that. Next on my list, kind of related to it, is ICE and activities. When Trump took office and during the campaign, he was always, and even recently, he said that we're going to deport the worst of the worst. And we're going to start with criminals. Now, keep in mind, if you are caught in the United States undocumented, that's a civil offense. If you're apprehended at the border the first time, that's a misdemeanor. So, like a speeding ticket. So now the second time you're caught at the border, it becomes a felony, and other things can turn it into a felony. But just looking at the simple cases, so these folks aren't the worst of the worst based on any offenses that they've done in the United States, except that I didn't write down the date, but sometime like 2023 or 4, the deputy director of Homeland Security provided a congressman with some figures, and in that there were 662,500 and some non-citizens who were arrested on felony charges. 435,700 and some were convicted. And in that group of 400,000, approximately 13,000 were for murder, approximately 16,000 were for sexual assault, approximately 62,000 were for simple assault. And let me point out also that the document that the deputy director sent used the term non-citizen. Undocumented is a subset of non-citizens. So we don't know how many from his document, we don't know how many of these were undocumented versus how many were people who were here on work visas or tourist visas or anything like that, because they're non-citizens, just like the undocumented people. So it's a little bit misleading. The point is that Trump and his goons are rounding up people that aren't worst of the worst. There are cases where, American citizens are being rounded up, probably because of the color of their skin, probably because of where they happen to be. And there are cases where college students are being picked up. But the most egregious cases in my mind are there are people who have come across the border, have requested political asylum. Then there's a process. And people are going through that process and going to their court appearances and being arrested by ICE as they leave the court appearances. Again, that's just un-American. My vision of America is that we try to play by the rules. And if you have somebody who's come to this country undocumented, asked for political asylum, they've gone into the system, and they're following the rules, and then you pick them up and deport them without additional due process, it just makes me crazy that this administration is doing this kind of thing and apparently getting away with it. Okay, I'll do one more kind of quick one, and then I'll get to maybe my longest one. Trump continues to lie. Just last night, he gave a political speech from the White House, and he asked for airtime for a presidential address. Now, in my lifetime, presidential addresses are for when the president has something of some importance to announce to the people, a policy statement of the fact that we're ending a war, the fact we're going into a war. In the case of Lyndon Johnson, the fact that he wasn't going to run for a second term as president. These are the kinds of things that you have presidential speeches for. Not this fast-talking, manic used car salesman infomercial that he spewed to the American people last night, condemning his political enemies once again, basically patting himself on the back, taking a victory lap when there's very few actual victories. There are some, and once again, lies. And there, I don't know how many lies there were in that 14 and a half minutes, but two I just picked up. One is I did the research. The lowest gasoline price state average is in Oklahoma, and it's currently at $2.34 a gallon. Trump gave the very strong impression, and maybe you could mince words, but the very strong impression that there are states in which the gasoline price is $1.99, under $2. I don't doubt that there's some station somewhere, perhaps in Oklahoma, that gasoline prices are $1.99, but it's not at any state level. It's not nationally. Gasoline prices have come down. So why didn't he say that and provide the actual numbers instead of making up this number of 199? I tell you why, because it made him sound better, and he doesn't care about the truth. The other thing I picked up is, once again, he gives the impression that these tariffs, the money coming in from the tariffs, are coming in from foreign countries. The tariffs are paid by the importers, who almost always are American citizens. Many of the importers pass them on to the retail, let's just say retail, Walmart. Walmart passes them on, much of them on to the consumer. So the American importer, the stock holders of a company, and the American consumer are paying those tariffs, those taxes. So it's not money coming in from the outside. And if you write a check to the military people, which I think was a very nice gesture, for $1,976, which I thought was kind of hokey, that in all likelihood isn't covering the amount of increase that they are paying because of the tariffs. So it's just a shell game played by a snake oil salesman. And there are other examples of his lies. He has great difficulty when it comes to the truth. One last comment related directly to the White House in this case. Oh, don't get me started on the 90,000 square feet ballroom. That sounds like a lot, and most people don't think through it as much as I do. 90,000 square feet is if you take 2 football fields, remove the end zones, and put the 2 football fields side by side. That's about 90,000 square feet. The White House doesn't need a 90,000 square foot ballroom, especially when you think it's going to be all gilded up with fake gold and so forth. So, bad idea. The president is also very petty. Recently put up pictures of some of I don't know how many presidents, and underneath each president he put a plaque talking about them. The plaques reflected his views of the presidents. So he said bad things about Obama, bad things about Biden, bad things about Clinton. I don't know what he said about the Bushes. He has no love for them, but it's stuff he made up. It's not anything about their accomplishments. Only a petty person would do something like that. And now, lastly, Charlie Kirk. I was going to do a thing on Charlie Kirk a little while ago, I wanted to give some passive time. I wanted to, in a way, acknowledge the fact that his assassination was a terrible thing. Political violence is terrible. And I wanted to be respectful in my little small way to the family and not talk about him till there's been at least a little bit of time for mourning. I don't think Charlie Kirk deserves all the post-mortem accolades and monuments and so forth that he's receiving. But let me say a couple of positive things about Charlie Kirk. I did force myself to watch Gavin Newsom's podcast where he sat down with Charlie Kirk, and I think there are a lot of lessons in there, not necessarily on Charlie Kirk's belief array, but on the methods that he used. I think he has a demeanor that allowed for a more civil debate than maybe we have in other places, although looking at a few of his university interactions, he was always interested in winning that debate. There was never the chance that his position was going to change. But he did. He with Newsom, he was very personable, and clearly he had the ability to motivate people, particularly young people. And I think the Democratic Party could benefit from spending the hour or so watching that interview and again looking at some of the things he had to say about where Democrats are missing the boat and some of the groups of people that Democrats should be interacting with. Having said that, I'm going to refer to a series of quotes from Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to start out with one that I find is positive. Before I read this quote, I'm not going to judge any man's religious beliefs or the validity of their beliefs or whatever. I will state that I heard one commentator said that it's a question as to whether Charlie Kirk was being used by God to spread a message, or whether Charlie Kirk was using God as an excuse to spread a message. I'll let you ponder on that on your own. The first quote, as I said, is, excuse me, a positive. He said, and all these are taken out of context, and I understand that, and all of them are. Charlie Kirk once said, "Explain to everyone what Jesus stood for, and especially the qualities of love. How do you love your neighbor? How to love your neighbor, even if you don't agree with them." So, if that quote exemplified everything that came after, I think I'd be very much aligned with Charlie Kirk. And in fact, I'll go so far as to say, if Charlie Kirk really believed that and really lived by that, he'd probably have to go into the woke category with me. Let me see here. I want to start over here. Charlie Kirk in 2024 said, "Stoning gay people is God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters." In 23, he said, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act of 1960. In 23, he also said, "One issue I think that is so against our senses, so against natural law, and I dare say a throbbing middle finger to God, is the transgender thing happening in America right now." Charlie Kirk said in 24, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, I hope he's qualified. Charlie Kirk said the following in 23. Martin Luther King was awful. He's not a good person. He said one good thing that he actually didn't believe. Now, I've also gathered up a couple quotes from Martin Luther King to show a contrast. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He said, the time is always right to do the right thing. He said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Ironically, the last quote came back very much to haunt Charlie Kirk and his family. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so we can have the Second Amendment to protect our God-given rights. The name of this podcast is Papa Tom's Take. My take on Charlie Kirk is that he was a charismatic, very bright young man, but his ideas were completely against my view of America. His comments were racist, they were gender-phobic, and in defense of the Second Amendment in such a absolute way that stepping back from it, he has to say that his assassination was worth it to protect those rights. In closing this episode, I always like to close with a quote and circle back to the title. We live in a time of whack-a-mole, and I just laid out some of the things that I would be whacking at, and there are more. The quote that I'm going to end with is, confusion is not a product of power. It is a tool of power. I don't have the name of where that originated. Confusion is not a byproduct of power. It is a tool of power. Clearly, we're living in a whack-a-mole administration, and a lot of this is to divert attention away from things like the Epstein files. Thank you for checking out episode 11. I hope that 12 comes along pretty soon, because I had a target for one a month, and I need to get one more in. So again, thank you for sitting through this podcast. Take care.